Have that motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Vice Chair
Second.
Castillo, seconded by Councilwoman Anthony. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. So we have our exhibits. Madam Clerk, are there any other exhibits? Okay, folks. So I think the way we're going to run this is we're going to have the administration make a presentation. Who from the administration will be presenting this evening? Is that Mr. Stokes? And Diana Perdomo. Thank you. So please come up, come forward, identify yourself for the record, and we're going to actually swear you in.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, council members. Thank you for having us. My name is Diana Perdomo, and I'm the Chief of Policy for the Mayor's Office. I'm accompanied by
Madam Chair, Keith Stokes, Director of Business and Development for the City of Providence.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk. Mr. Stokes, you can wheel that chair right over and sit down, please. I don't want to put you in any
It
pain.
actually helps to stand.
You're good?
Yeah,
Well,
that's good.
feel free if any time you feel, okay, very good.
one request, please, council members. If it would be possible to have Rodney Davis join us as well. He's the chair of the Reparations Commission.
I was going to
He'll be joining
have him come up and speak on his report. Do you wish him to be part of your presentation as well?
us. We can integrate it all together if you prefer.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Rodney Davis, Chair of Providence Municipal Reparations Commission.
Thank you. Please swear him in, Madam Clerk. Okay, folks, before you get started, I just want everybody, for everybody's base of knowledge, what is before us is a $10 million budget. It was approved through the opera as part of the opera budget. The dollar amount is in the opera budget funding. What is before us is a spending plan. And the commission that Mr. Davis is here to talk about, and the exercise that the administration is going to speak about is about coming up with a spending plan for this money. So please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Thank you so much to the City Council, to the public that's joined us today, and of course, the Reparations Commission's members who have helped us develop this budget for you. I'm only here to do a quick introduction. I spent plenty of time in front of the Finance Committee earlier this year to actually talk about the fuller budget around the American Rescue Plan, and was really happy that the council supported and wanted to see forward the COVID-19 Equity Fund of $10 million. Since then, we've been hard at work developing that plan with the support of the commission and community members, particularly the African American Ambassador Group and beyond that. Today's presentation is actually going to be done by Director Keith Stokes. He has been helping and working with the commission through the original report through the American Rescue Plan, the commission report, and has also helped the team in working together in developing this budget for you. So I'm just going to pass it over to Keith. He'll do the quick presentation, and I'm sure there'll be some words from Rodney as well, the chair of the
Ms.
commission.
Perdomo, before you leave the podium, can you please testify that the budget that is put forth for the spending plan is in complete conformance with the rules and regulations of OPER budgeting and spending practices?
Yes, absolutely. We've had multiple reviews of this budget. So not only did we have our legal team review the definitions put forward by the commission to ensure that that was in compliance with the American Rescue Plan, we also had iParametrics, our outside consultant, working on compliance, review all of the programs being put forward in front of you today. So I'm very confident that this does comply with the American Rescue Plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. And what I'd like to do is walk you through a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll go through page to page that provides a summary of the intent and the work. And then most importantly, I can walk you through line by line the budget recommendations as a part of the plan.
Does everyone have, the committee, council members, audience members, do you have the benefit of copies of this? You do not? Sergeant, could you help? Apparently, the presentation that Mr. Stokes is going to provide is on the back table. Can we make sure that the audience has copies of that? We had intended to put this presentation up on the big screen, folks. Because we moved, we lost our automation. So please bear with us. And I thank you, Mr. Stokes, for accommodating this change. Just give a second to get those. Don't hammer. Okay, so I've been informed that many of them are already been circulated. Sergeant, the front row, please. I ask you to share if you can. Thank you. Mr. Stokes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first slide, which is a summary, provides a summary of the efforts that have led to a Municipal Reparation Commission report and the recommendations before you. As many know, this began in the summer of 2020 as a part of the process to respond to the worldwide George Floyd movement. As a part of that process, the administration established an African-American ambassador group comprised of men and women across the city representing the interests of the African-American community. That group had made a number of recommendations on policies and programs, including establishing a Juneteenth holiday, also removing plantation from the names of the city artifacts and articles, but also the committee also made a recommendation to begin to establish what became a 3-stage process of truth-telling, reconciliation that would lead to a reparative justice or a reparation investment strategy. Next page. As a part of that process, a truth-telling process was initiated through the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society, who researched and collaborated with the city archives, historical societies across the state, and created a 200-page report entitled the Matter of Truth Report, which provided about 4 centuries of racialized discrimination, largely tied to public policies and practices, again, starting in 1620 to 2020. That report set the stage for a reconciliation process where Roger Williams universities and others would reach out to the communities and engage community members in having dialogue around what reparations might mean to them today and the present day, and also having a clear understanding of that history. As a part of that reconciliation process, it was determined to establish a public member municipal reparations commission. That commission was established on February 28th, 2022 of this year, where 13 community members representing a cross-section of the community, with 7 appointed by the mayor and the administration and 6 by the council. That commission spent the next several months designing and developing and researching a program of work, which led to the final municipal reparation report and the budget plan that's presented before you today. As a part of the Municipal Reparation Commission process, the next slide, please, or the next page, there was significant efforts of community engagement. Again, community engagement is always an ongoing process, but the goal over those months was to engage and be able to interact with as many members of the community institutions that would have a specific interest as a person of color and as a community of an interest in reparative justice and reparation investment strategies. Next page. I think the most important work of the Municipal Reparations Commission was defining reparations. Providence, Rhode Island is one of the first communities and one of the singular communities that have defined reparations simply as closing the racial wealth equity gap in people, in neighborhoods within the city of Providence. Most other cities and states and nations see reparations as focusing exclusively on repairing the injustices of the transatlantic slave trade, activities that occurred centuries before. This commission understood that racial discrimination certainly began with the transatlantic slave trade and the slave system. It certainly began with the indigenous land taking, but then it continued through the centuries. And it evolved into new public policies and practices well into the present day that included urban renewal policies and practices that deconstructed larger communities of color, such as Fox Point, Olneyville, South Providence, West Elmwood, and so on, but also federal, state, and municipal policies and processes through redlining that restricted access to very basic federal benefits and services of owning a home, owning a business, insuring that home, having an opportunity to live a life within the community in this city and state and country. So what's most important here is that reparations is seen as repairing an injustice that started several centuries ago, but still occur to this very day. It in fact is a part of that process that's embodied into the report. An economist was brought in to look at present day racial, ethnic, class disparities that still exist within this city and still embodied within neighborhoods. And the areas that were looked at that you see within the report included income disparity, health disparity, education disparity, minority and women-owned business disparities, and so on. So what's absolutely essential to understand, this investment strategy by recommendation of this commission is not simply looking at the past, it's looking at building a bridge today and building equity and opportunity for Providence residents in the neighborhoods that they reside of the greatest need. I want to now just walk through on the next page the eligibility criteria, because that becomes a very important element. As we all know, and as this budget has been put forth, this recommended budget is anchored on American Rescue Plan or ARPA dollars. So it's absolutely essential that we follow United States Department of Treasury requirements. In that, the commission made the recommendation to establish 4 criteria for participation by individuals or by communities and neighborhoods in the receipt of these dollars. The first criteria is Indigenous people, those people who are, as stated in the report, clearly part of and share a collective connection to the Indigenous communities of this city and this state and this nation. The second, African heritage people. This is a very unique, but also a uniquely representative representation of the people of Providence and their history. African heritage includes African American, African born, African Latino, African Caribbean, biracial, multiracial, Cape Verdean. It really represents and recognizes many of the men, women, and families and communities today represent a much broader picture of the people who have the greatest needs within this city. And again, it's a compliment to the commission to recognize that they were putting together a reparations budget and investment strategy that was proactive and going forward that would immediately engage the people and communities today in 2022 going forward. And then the third important requirement is qualified census neighborhoods. Under the U.S. Department of Treasury ARPA guidelines, investment strategies are prioritized within qualified census tracts. In the case of the city of Providence, those neighborhoods that reside under U.S. Treasury qualified census tracts include Mount Hope, Oleyville, Wansop, Washington Park, the South Side, Smith Hill, all the communities that are currently designated low and moderate income communities for services. And then the final requirement, an important requirement, is residents facing poverty. The goal here is to be able to provide investments and to be able to target investments in people of greatest financial need. So those either 50% or 30% very desperately poor below the AMI. Again, the goal here is that if Oprah Winfrey moved to Providence tomorrow, she wouldn't be eligible, nor should she be eligible. The goal as an eligibility criteria is to be able to invest in those people and those communities of greatest defined need. I'm just going to pause here to turn it over to Chairman Rodney Davis. Rodney was the chair of the commission, and it was the commission through this research and through this work that have defined an 11-point investment strategy that will ultimately set the platform for the budget that we have before you. Rodney?
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be standing here to talk about this very important issue. I never imagined when I bought my house on 360 River Avenue that I would be here talking about something about how this is going to change lives. And so we really had to spend some time thinking about the purpose and focus of this, of the commission recommendation on reparations. One of the first things that we wanted to make sure is that we weren't going to sit here and tell others exactly what they needed. We needed to go out, we needed to engage, we needed to have hard conversations about this. And so it took lots of weeks and lots of meetings, as you all probably recognize, to be able to get something to move ahead. And we recognized one common denominator that we needed to see. That common denominator was the closing of the present-day racial wealth and equity gap. And that is a very real thing. when standing outside one night just across the street, I saw a person taking a bag and filling it with paper to make a pillow to sleep on. That was his living room, that was his bedroom. This problem is real, and we need to find solutions. So as a result, we came up with 11 recommendations. And the very first thing is often the case with individuals. We need to recognize the harm. That was our very first thing. The second thing is that equity building for our African heritage and indigenous communities was incredibly important. We wanted the third point of creating and developing an African heritage and indigenous media and technology and communication focus. How do we get our information? Things are changing. And in fact, as a part of our being able to be engaged in the process, both civically and within our social communities, this was an important component. The creation of African heritage and indigenous development programs within our neighborhoods, as was highlighted by Keith concerning these neighborhoods that were impacted severely by the COVID-19 pandemic. We all recognized, we saw the numbers, we watched it every day, we were glued to the TV to see those who were becoming infected coincided with the information you have here. These neighborhoods were definitely, and our communities were impacted. We want to review and reform the laws and policies that harm African heritage and indigenous peoples and those communities. We want to have a movement towards a more equitable healthcare system for African heritage and indigenous peoples. I stand here right now, I had to turn my phone off because I stand as a diabetic where my phone tells me when my sugar is off and my high blood pressure is there. And I sort of had a joke with my doctor. He was like, you know, Black people have to be careful about diabetes. I went, yes, it's a stress disease. The endocrine system is affected by the pressure, and that racism is a healthcare issue. We need to have a creation of neighborhood incubators focused on African heritage and indigenous communities. We want to accelerate the evolution of the African American Ambassadors Group into an African Heritage Public Policy Institute model. When I was invited to sit and to join these meetings, what an amazing ability to bring people together with different viewpoints to create real solutions in our community. And the council should like it. It was for free. These are people giving their time from our communities to offer solutions. The ninth is the creation of an African heritage and indigenous survivors and descendants of Providence Urban Renewal Development Fund. What is that? Well, as many might have taken the time to read the report of A Matter of Truth, we have seen many instances in our recent history of how the urban renewal development was basically code to getting Black people out of certain neighborhoods so that other institutions and businesses could thrive and take advantage of the land. Something that isn't broke, they continue to use oftentimes. They did that to our indigenous population too. Our 10th recommendation was expanding representation of African heritage and indigenous people in governing bodies. We need to be present and we need to be engaged. And the final was the expansion of cultural engagement and educational opportunities for African heritage and indigenous communities. And this speaks very close and dear to me. I've worked in education for a very long time. I've worked as the communications director for Big Picture Learning, which created the Met School in 1996. And I have worked with them since 1998. I've seen the importance of cultural engagement in educating. If you do not know who you are and where you came from, you will not have a clear direction on where you're going. So we wanted to offer these recommendations, and we presented them to the city after a real deep conversation, not only within the community for weeks upon years, but also with ourselves. And we present them and are honored to present them to you all tonight for your consideration.
Forgot to turn my microphone on. I'd like to recognize Councilwoman Harris is with us this evening, Councilman Goncalves, Councilwoman Miller, and we also have the Democratic nominee Juan Pachado for council has joined us and is sitting in the front row behind the rail there. Solicitor Cheverini is also with us, so thank you and please continue.
Madam Chair, what I'd like to do is to walk through each of the proposed budget items, which start in slide 7 or page 7. And I can do it quickly, and then we can go back to have any discussions.
Please continue.
The first recognition is $400,000 to set aside on what is called recognition of harm. Under recognition of harm, there's been a recommendation to design and develop a program that would largely operate out of the Arts and Cultural and Tourism Office in developing an investment strategy to enhance the reimagining of public sites, memorials, and statues and murals. The goal here and the recommendation here is to be able to have public recognitions of sites that represent the broader community, the history of the broader community, and represent the community of Providence today and going forward. So this would be embodied into many of the things that we see today that the city has initiated. The street and wall murals, the art programs, some of the creation of new statues and memorials across the city, so that we have a public space in public recognition that recognizes all the men and women and families that take part and are part of the history of Providence. The second area, which is 2 slides, equity building for African heritage and indigenous people, which comprise $6 million out of the 10, starts with a first item of home ownership and financial literacy of $1 million. The goal here was one of the fastest ways to close the racial wealth equity gap is to enable people of color and people of limited incomes to build equity. And I think we all recognize the fastest path of building equity is owning a home. We also realized through the research and the analysis that people of color in many neighborhoods were restricted of having access to that due to public policies at the federal, state, and local level, including redlining and other activities. So this program would be specifically set aside to enforce and enact affordable housing opportunities tied to home ownership. Along with that would be a training program to engage potential participants to have all the tools to understand of owning a home, managing a mortgage, and successfully building equity for themselves. The second program is a home repair fund. And again, the commission thought very strongly that the ability to own a home is very much tied to being able to repair and service and support that home. The third area, which is called capacity investments in community organizations, $500,000, that was a recognition to the fact that the front lines of meeting the needs of residents of greatest need are nonprofit community organizations. And nonprofit community organizations have also had the greatest challenge through COVID, being able to marshal their own resources and their capacity to deliver those services. So this would be an opportunity to invest in those nonprofit organizations who are doing the hard work, particularly within qualified census tracts in those populations, in providing a variety of services from workforce training to direct social service support, to education, to food assistance, shelter assistance. And then the final category, $1 million under this, is an earn and learn workforce training program. Again, next to home ownership, the other fastest way of creating financial stability and building equity is having a good job. and having income within that job to sustain themselves and their family. So this program would work in conjunction with the city's First Source program to begin to not only identify Providence residents looking for gainful employment, but design and develop, working with the state and other partners, targeted training programs and certification programs to ensure that those men and women and families have the training and the education and preparation to fulfill a full-time sustainable wage and job. One of the aspects that the commission has uncovered is one of the great barriers for many people to receive training and support services is that it's usually during the day, and it's very difficult to leave even a low-wage job where people are underemployed to take on a training program or certification program over 6 weeks or 6 months. This program would provide a sustainable wage during that training period so that household, that family have an opportunity to spend their full attention getting certified, trained, and prepared to enter a full-time position job. And again, the goal would be is to design this program and leverage this program with the existing First Source program in the workforce training programs that we operate in the Office of Economic Opportunity. Madam Chair, I don't want to feel like I'm rushing through it, so should I just continue or should I stop and answer any questions? All right, thank
Continue
you.
through it, and then we'll allow the committee to ask questions at the end. I think it
Thank
would make
you.
most sense. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of information here. I want to make sure it's fair. The next item, which is an additional within the $6 million, is a small business acceleration program of $1.5 million. Again, building equity within minority and women and disadvantaged businesses is a policy of the city. The city has had for a number of years a minority women business enterprise ordinance in place. This is an opportunity to make direct investments in partnership with the state and private participants in being able to advance and accelerate the creation of minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and expanding their opportunity to succeed within the city of Providence. In several of the areas that are being looked at is creating a micro-enterprise support program, because as a part of the research, what we found, most of the small businesses in this city are micro-enterprises, which are defined as 1 to 5 employees, a sole proprietor, a home-based business person, very, very small. And they lack the basic access of resources, the technical assistance, access to debt, loans, equity to improve upon themselves. We also found that there was a significant need to support the existing Providence Business Loan Fund program to provide an equity investment tool. The current program is successful, but it is tied to federal requirements under the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Economic Development Administration, so it limits the breadth and the depth of its lending opportunities. And also that we found that many sole proprietor home-based business people aren't ready for debt. They need an equity investment to get them started on a pathway of building their business. And then eventually they would qualify for a traditional loan, be it through the Providence Loan Fund or for the commercial market. There was also a recommendation, and I think this is a critical recommendation. The city of Providence has a current minority women business enterprise ordinance. It is not an enforceable ordinance. It allows at best the best efforts to participate in the program and to meet the goals of 10% minority and 10% women participation. Nearly every other urban city in the country have stronger enforceable ordinances that started with a comprehensive disparity study. We are obligated, going back to case law of the Supreme Court in 1986, we are obligated to qualify and quantify disparity between minority and women and other categories. So we are looking to finally set aside dollars to initiate a comprehensive disparity study that will allow us and provide a platform of the best practices of having a stronger ordinance, and most importantly, an enforceable and constitutional ordinance. There's also a recommendation of an additional $500,000 for the expansion of the Guaranteed Income Program, particularly targeting minority households and minority populations within guaranteed census tracts or low and moderate income neighborhoods. There's also a recommendation of expansion of youth internship programs, particularly in the areas of apprenticeship, and particularly providing levels of flexibility to allow Providence youth and young residents an opportunity to take advantage of job training and opportunities within job training in some of the fastest growing industries that are right here within this city. As an example, offshore wind. Many of the components of the offshore wind facilities will be coming right to our Port of Providence. And right across from the Port of Providence is Washington Park and South Providence And those residents and neighbors should have the first access to training and support to be able to obtain those jobs. And again, this program would be partnering with existing partners who have been providing workforce training programs with the city, with our office on an ongoing basis over the last several years. And then the final piece is establishing a legal defense fund facing rental evictions. Again, it's been clearly documented, it's been clearly understood that there are far too many residents that are facing eviction because of COVID-related impacts. And we want to be able to have a fund in place to allow proper legal representation for anyone and everyone that needs to remain in their home and in their rental property as an option. The next category on what is called creation and development of African heritage indigenous media, technology, and communication companies, $250,000 has been suggested to be set aside to begin to develop a plan and a pathway to establish a minority-owned media program within the city. How that becomes is really going to require a feasibility analysis because, again, it might be a fixed radio station, it might be digital podcast and digital environments, it might be a combination. But what's been made clear through the commission and its community outreach, there needs to be a mechanism when the minority community can be able to provide information, news, interpretation, and prioritization of what is of value to the community by running their own system. Again, we're one of the few urban cities in the country with a significant population of color population that doesn't have that type of media system in place. The next category, which is the creation of African heritage indigenous development programs, 1.2 million. The first program is further expanding operational capacities of particularly nonprofit and particularly BIPOC, Black, persons of color, and indigenous organizations and operations across the city. Again, this focus will be focused on those institutions and organizations that are already anchored, will continue to be anchored in qualified census tracts in low and moderate income neighborhoods. These nonprofit organizations are at the front line of delivering the most critical services and needs to the residents of this city. And it is absolutely essential that we recognize their efforts and support building the capacity of their organizations to be able to achieve these efforts. The second area is to preserve, safeguard, and promote cultural programs, and this is $200,000. These dollars are set aside to suggest that the cultural engagement and educational opportunities that have come from the last 2 years of history and reconciliation could later be developed into long-term programs that can be built into public schools, into community centers, into the larger community. The next area of investment is entitled Creation of Survivors and Descendants of Urban Renewal Fund, $400,000. And this is really recognizing the fact that urban renewal is present-day history. We're talking about a public action that took place not 300 years ago like slavery, or 400 years ago like indigenous land taking, but 50 and 60 and 70 years ago. And it significantly impacted people of color largely, poor people largely, within the homes and communities that they lived within. So the stories of the former Lippet Hill and the impact on West Elmwood or Upper South Providence are clear. So the goal here is to develop two funds. One, a fund that begin to help to focus on investing in those communities where families are still being displaced or having less access to services or economic stability. So communities such as Fox Point, Lippet Hill unfortunately doesn't exist today, University Heights, but the Mount Hope neighborhood and so on. There's also a recommendation of setting aside dollars to provide direct grants to local neighborhoods and businesses within those traditional impact areas to, again, provide an opportunity to them for to build capacity and to sustain themselves, particularly within those existing communities. Our goal here is to rise up Onlyville in Washington Park in South Providence, and not tied directly to this budget, but the $2.5 million set aside under facility development. The goal there is to begin to invest in capital projects to begin to reclaim properties and sites that would have the historic benefits of communities of color in those communities. One of the first projects that we are looking at is the former Urban League site on Prairie Avenue. The next area is entitled Expansion of Cultural Engagement and Educational Opportunities for $1.2 million. And this is broken down into several smaller programs. The first is a creation of a K-12 Matter of Truth curriculum. This would take the research, the study, of the Matter of Truth report and incorporate it into a curriculum that would be made available to Providence K-12 students. I'm excited about this because Rhode Island Black Heritage Society, Rhode Island College, Rhode Island Historical Society, we're already working on these curriculums. So we already have in place a number of public, private, and particularly educational partners willing to step in and to provide their expertise and to assist the Providence School Department in designing these programs. Related to that is the K-12 curriculum grounded in Rhode Island, New England history. Again, ensuring that our social studies programs and our historical programs represent and include the history of all the people of the city of Providence, past, present, and future. The third area is an invest in a district-wide coordinator for educational enrichment. Again, having someone be a point person, a lead person who can oversee and ensure and braid public, private, federal, local dollars to ensure the implementation of these cultural enrichment programs. And then the final area is funding to establish an African Heritage Indigenous History School. This was a recommendation for a feasibility study to see if there is a need or a possibility of developing a magnet school program or a charter school program within a theme of the African and certainly the Indigenous history of this city. And I'm wrapping it up very quickly. I apologize again, there was a number of line items here. It's hard doing this through pages versus a PowerPoint. The next area is expansion of cultural engagement educational opportunities. Part 2, there's a recommendation of advancing public education campaigns to, again, to continually to engage the public and to allow the public to participate in programs and policies and education initiatives, particularly that will shape their communities and their city. There's also a recommendation of a creation of an Artists in Residence Fund. And again, the opportunity here, working very closely with our excellent Arts and Cultural and Tourism Office, is to begin to encourage young artists, and particularly artists and women of color, to be actively engaged in shaping the very physicality of their city through artwork, murals, programming, and services. The next area is creating a resident scholarship fund. Again, there is a significant understanding that post-secondary education opportunities become costly, be it training opportunities or academic opportunities, they become restrictive. This begins a process of setting dollars aside, catalytic dollars aside, that would hopefully attract other private public investments so that dollars could be set aside that needy Providence residents would have access to scholarship dollars to give them tuition to be able to access their dreams of either higher education or workforce training or certification needed to better their lives. And then the final area is the creation of a fund for home-based daycare providers. One of the most important micro enterprises in this city are the home-based daycare providers. Each and every day, they're watching kids and children to allow many of us the luxury to go to work and feel that our children are being safely cared for. We need to make a very specific investment in building the capacity and the capability of these very important home-based businesses and micro enterprises who continue to work out of their homes and on behalf of the broader community. I would also point out that a significant demographic of this population are women and women of color who are these micro enterprise owners. The next area, which is called Movement Towards a More Equitable Healthcare System of $400,000. Again, as Rodney has stated and that the commission has clearly understood, there are significant health, both mental, physical, and behavioral health programs that people have weathered, particularly exacerbated through COVID. So there's a suggestion that $150,000 be set aside to expand mental and behavioral health wellness programs, particularly for populations within qualified census tract populations. There's also a $250,000 recommendation to invest in programs that reduce health disparities, particularly within vulnerable neighborhoods and populations. And I would envision this, if approved, as a program that would be further defined and developed through our excellent Health Equity Office in the work that the staff is doing currently within the community. And then the final is to accelerate the evolution of the African American Ambassador Group into an African Heritage Policy Institute for $150,000. One of the most important efforts that the African American Ambassador Group as volunteers have done has spent the last several years making significant policy and program recommendations for the city, and many which have come to fruition. But this has been done by volunteers. It's been done without a budget. It's been done without the ability of having scholarship, research, and analysis that can provide the platform for any policy recommendations that come back before the city. So there is a recommendation here to begin to review and begin to assess the opportunity of creating a freestanding public policy institute that would be charged with providing the research, the planning, the analysis that would drive public policy decisions, not only through the reparations effort, but through any efforts that are important to the city. Many urban cities across the country have these institutions. In Rhode Island, similar institutions are the Latino Policy Institute associated with Roger Williams University, and also the Economic Progress Institute associated with Rhode Island College. So again, please forgive me if I seem like I rushed through it. It's a lot of information, but I'm certainly here with Diana and Rodney to answer any questions you might have on any of the line items. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Committee members, do you have any questions? If I can ask you to just stay there for a second. Committee members, Councilwoman Anthony?
Yes, I'd like to thank actually everyone who participated in this process. I mean, this body of work is significant and will be impactful to the city. It's really amazing. And I have to thank the community who participated. It's really incredible. My question is just a few, and I realize that there was a great deal of community input, which I think has been absolutely wonderful. My question is, I just wanted to know if in the development of the budget, I mean, the $10 million is a given, it's already been approved. You know, ARPA, it's been designated for this very important work. My question is, when you did prepare the detailed budget, did that also go through a very robust community process?
So I will note that the Reparations Commission developed the recommendations by which the budget was developed. And as that budget was developed, we of course then had conversations with the community about it. We had conversations with the commission, getting feedback on that budget. We had conversations with council members to talk about the budget. And so we have continued to get ongoing feedback as we presented the budget to the city council. Rodney, do you want to say anything?
And recognizing that the engagement process of being able to do that, we recognize it is challenging. Having meetings in the middle of the day can be difficult for folks. So in addition to that, we also provided a portal for people to be able to submit their thoughts, their suggestions, their recommendations, so that we'd be able to have that insight likewise, so that we can be able to move forward with that.
Thank you, Council President. Just to add, if and when this is approved, each and every one of these budget items or program plans would be required to go through a very transparent public procurement process, which will require each in its own right, a community engagement process, a notification process, a review process. So I just want to be clear to the fact that each and every one of these programs would have to follow prescribed city procurement processes.
Thank you, that helps. And I understand the procurement process. Who is going to be overseeing this to make sure that the money is spent as allocated in this budget?
Yes, similar to the rest of the American Rescue Plan funds, this will be all vetted through the Recovery Office. I'm currently heading that office, and we have staff who support it, and also working with our iParametrics team as consultants. They actually review all of the RFPs we put out, all of the requirements. We have contract templates that are adhere to the Treasury guidance. So the legal department also helps us through with this. So it'll continue to be within the Recovery Office, but I also see this, as Director Stokes had mentioned in some of the briefings we had done, we have department designees who will be responsible for each fund, similar to the larger $166 million in the American Rescue Fund. So right now, those departments have already been notified about those budgets. They're creating those plans for RFPs. We're close to being able to release that if we get some support from you all to do that. So for instance, ACT is already in the know, DEEB's on the know, the Department of Equity, Inclusion, Belonging, Diversity for the city, along with the Arts, Culture, and Tourism Division, working with the Office of Economic Opportunity. So various divisions across the city are going to be responsible for each of these funds, as they are noted under those areas of expertise, but the Recovery Office will be ultimately responsible for ensuring the contracting goes appropriately and ensuring that the procurement is all done according to the city rules and also the Treasury guidance.
Okay.
One more?
Another follow-up?
I'm sorry,
Please,
yes, a
Councilwoman
follow-up.
Anthony.
The other, just the other thing I'd just like to speak to for a minute is I know that some of this money looks, the allocations look duplicative. In other words, I think we've covered some of these areas elsewhere in the ARPA budget. So I'm just looking to free up more funds to do the work that you have set out your plan for, because I'm just hoping that, you know, we could find, if something's already covered, funded elsewhere, wouldn't that money be available to use for other programs to advance the 11-point plan?
Right. I'll note that all of the recommendations noted in the budget were conversation points through the commission's meetings, through the weekly or the meetings that happen weekly with the commission, the public. So all the concepts brought forward here, whether they were in the initial American Rescue Plan versus this budget, had all been part of those conversations. So this is entirely community driven. None of those concepts would be put forward if they were not already in conversation and through the recommendations that came from the commission discussions. We don't see this as duplicative. We see this as an opportunity to continue strong programming, but focusing it towards the recommendations of the commission. So the 4 areas of qualification that are outlined from the commission, we'd be programming more specific to that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Are you all set?
For now, yes, thank you.
Actually, I'd like to have our policy director opine on the topic of some duplication in this budget, if that's okay. Sean Bouchard, please, if you'd offer some clarification.
Certainly, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I just wanted to highlight quickly, as the councilman rightly pointed out, there is some duplication between the overriding ARPA budget that was approved in May and the proposed spending plan currently before you. The 3 kind of significant ones would be the home repair program, guaranteed income, and legal defense. It's not to say that those are not very important programs. I think the point would simply be that those are receiving outside funding from the overriding ARPA budget. We've been in discussions with Keith Stokes regarding those line items specifically. They total around $1.75 million of the proposed $10 million. And so in coordination with Keith and the administration, I think the proposal we were hoping to move forward with would be to hold those dollars in reserve for the time being to continue the community outreach program, to continue to see if there's ways to either expand other areas within this spending plan, dedicate those resources elsewhere to continue to maximize the impact of these dollars, given that those programs that are mentioned in this spending plan are receiving funding already. And rather than trying to adjust those on the fly, simply continue that conversation around, again, the 1.75 million of the overriding 10 that has been provided before you. So that will be an ongoing conversation only on those 3 line items. The rest of them, there was no duplication of any kind.
Thank you. Okay, Councilman Taylor,
Yes, I have a couple questions.
please.
The 1.5 million for the small business, how would you figure that out? In other words, and I'm just doing quick math. Let's say if you gave out $20,000 per, is there a max that you give out? Number one, and let's just say if it's 20,000, then we can only take care of 75 businesses with that money.
Thank you, Councilman Taylor. In looking at that program, it's not really being set up to specifically go these dollars directly to an individual business. It would be set up to go into a program that would in turn provide benefit to a business. So as an example, you see where they expand the Providence Business Loan Fund's micro enterprise investment program. We would suggest that some of these dollars be set aside to enhance that program, because one of the challenges I've said before within the loan fund, I sit on that board, is that those dollars are capitalized with federal dollars with significant restrictions. And they also do not allow for startup, early stage business investment. So we would set aside a portion of these dollars through the loan fund to be an equity fund that would be targeted to those micro enterprise startup businesses within the city, such as a home-based daycare or whatever it might be. We're also looking at partnering with the state. We're actually having active discussions with the state and partnering with several programs that they're looking to design and develop. The state of Rhode Island has received significant dollars through Commerce RI to set up equity investment funds. They are also looking to partner with cities such as ourselves, where we could provide technical assistance so that small businesses, micro enterprises would have the opportunity to be prepared and have a business plan to apply for that enterprise fund or investment fund. We're currently operating a program like that today. In fact, with your support, as a part of the COVID-19 small business dollars. As you recall, we set aside a portion of those dollars, $85,000, and we've retained a firm to come in to specifically provide technical assistance and direct support assistance to Providence-based companies. As of today, we have close to 90 small businesses, mostly micro enterprises, who are using that service. And I'd be certainly willing to provide you reports or any information you would want on this. So again, these dollars are really going to be set aside, Councilman, to invest in existing programs and services and extend and advance their capability to support micro and small businesses within the city. There's another portion of these dollars that would be set aside where we would put out through a procurement process, an RFP, to design and develop a racial disparity study to support our MBE, WBE ordinance. That would be an RFP process. I can tell you, as someone who was acquainted with the state process several years ago, that's a 9-month, very intense, very comprehensive process. I can't tell you today what the amount is, but again, we're talking about a 9-month process where a team will come in and assess over a number of years the levels of non-participation of minority, women, and other designated populations. So we see this as an opportunity to literally be catalytic, not transformative, to catalyze existing programs like the Providence Business Loan Fund, the technical assistance programs, and other services and partnerships to further extend within, again, populations and neighborhoods that were defined by the Commission of Greatest Need. I hope that answered your question.
It does, but I was just wondering, is there a minimum or maximum that we're planning on giving these on any of these?
That would be, again, that would be up to the Providence Business Loan Fund if this was approved.
And the reason I ask, I worked on the COVID task force for the state and went around to all the businesses and, gave out paperwork and talked to them. And there's a lot of businesses, including in Providence, that didn't make it through this COVID. And I saw, and everybody saw, X business got maybe 10,000, but Y business only got 2,000. And it just wasn't a fair shakeup. And some of those businesses, including factories that were still doing factory business, went out of business because they couldn't afford. So if I had a business and I went out of business, you're telling me I can't ask for any of these money because I'd be starting up again? How does that work?
No. What I had said is that the goal with the micro enterprise program is to focus investment dollars in startup and early stage companies, because they currently don't qualify for traditional loan programs, including our own traditional loan program. So these dollars are really going to be dedicated to that urban-based business person, home-based business person, sole proprietor that probably has little or no capital. They probably need assistance in developing a business plan to take that idea from concept to actually workable program. And this program, these dollars will be tied to that effort. So we're really looking at, quite candidly, nurturing and building a small business community starting at the very micro level. Because again, the data that is presented to us, that is the demographics that we have within the city. I would be very willing to share a state study that I was involved in this past year that looked very deeply in and broke down the needs of micro enterprises, particularly women and minority businesses in this state, which was largely Providence area.
And last question, if I may.
Please.
If I am a Spanish woman and I have a daycare and I meet the qualifications and I'm in the census, like say in my Ward 8, would they meet the recommendations, or do they have to be African-American or Indigenous? How does that work?
Well, again,
that's the questions that I'm
no,
hearing,
it's a great question. The eligibility criteria that the commission had set forth is the African heritage. African heritage meaning African-American, African-born, African-Caribbean, African-Latino, biracial, multiracial. The commission, to its credit, recognized the population of Providence today and the need today. They also understood that, unfortunately, Indigenous and African-Americans who face slavery still face racial discrimination, and now new immigrants and new groups within these cities are still facing these challenges. So in that scenario, that person would qualify. You could qualify under living in a qualified census tract, you could qualify as African heritage, Indigenous, or you could qualify as a resident facing poverty. So there are 4 bites at the apple that any resident or any business could certainly qualify from. And again, I give credit to the commission of having that foresight in recognizing the broader needs of the people of Providence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, anyone else? Council members, Councilwoman Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you for the work that was done around this proposal that you have brought before us today. I also enjoyed hearing the fact that it was a robust community engagement process, which means this is many voices that have been contributing to this. I was glad to hear that. I do have a question. Both my colleagues have sort of asked the questions in a different kind of way that I have, so I ignore those questions. But what I want to ask is, you have a lot of programs that you have presented to us. Is there any particular order or rollout or a way you're gonna approach this in a way that we start to see some of this become real for us? And yeah.
I'm happy to take that. Recognizing that there's an election has happened, there's lots going on. The team is dedicated to doing as much as we can in the next number of months to see this forward, and then institutionalizing the budget to make sure that it. I'm sorry, I get nervous when I do. I speak too fast. I will
Please
speak
continue.
again. So we are working with a number of the departments to ensure that this is part of their budget going forward and that they plan it, but we are also hitting the ground running. With your approval, we will get started very hard to make sure we can move these dollars soon. And as I mentioned earlier, we are already working with departments who know, for example, the Art, Culture, and Tourism Division maybe will be playing a role into this budget, have already looked at this, are looking at designing the RFP, the process for which this is going out. So we are eager to get started on this, knowing that there's a lot of need out there. And I'll personally promise you that I'm putting in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to see this forward.
Councilwoman?
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you for that. I also would like very much to piggyback off our policy person to talk about, and my colleague, to talk about the duplicates of some of the allocations and the fact that we're trying to spend $10 million really fast, right? And is there a possibility that you would be willing to not spend $10 million just like that, just in case there's something else that come up? I mean, I know we have a timeline, but the timeline is not that far, you know, it's not that wide a gap that we can't see what else is going to be a part of a discussion. The projects, by the way, I like the programs, is not something, I definitely want to look at the things that we call duplicates, you know, just to say that in case something else.
I think that I hear absolutely what you're saying, and I express similar concern. I think making sure we do things right and well thought out. I do believe, though, that we have had a lot of input to point to this date. We have received a lot of feedback, and the programs that are put forward, a number of those that you're considering duplicative, there's a lot more need there still, and in particular in how to address the racial wealth gap in the city. So I think time is of the essence, and we should be urgently looking to help support as many residents as possible. So I completely understand your perspective, and I hear that, and I understand, and also feel that need to do this well and well thought out, ensuring there's appropriate input. I think it's amazing that we started getting input from the American Rescue Plan Task Force. We had over 1,500 people participate in that, and reparations and various programs came up multiple times early on then, and then we continued this engagement. So I feel confident that we can see this forward. I really feel strongly that the budget represents the needs and asks of the community. And I also don't think that us moving forward in a timely fashion will actually harm the integrity of the program, nor the results that we'd be looking to seek.
All set, Councilwoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Goncalves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stokes, Mr. Davis, Ms. Perdomo. We appreciate your presentation and leadership on this. I'd like to also acknowledge the members of the community who are a part of this commission. So Chairman Davis, Vice Chairperson Arnell Millhouse, who's in the crowd, Lon Ray, Jessica Brown, Wanda Brown, if you could acknowledge yourself, Jim Vincent, Two Hawks Watson was also here, I believe. Kyle Bennett, Michael Costa, Phyllis Evans. I don't know if she's here. I don't know if I saw her. Dwayne Hackney, who's a real leader in the community. Dwayne Keys, and also Christian Potter. Just want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership on this work. We can't thank you enough for being here and for showing up. These priorities are extremely noble, and I disagree with these being duplicitous. I think there's a lot of need out there, as you mentioned, Diana, and I'm curious for those who are interested in, if this passes. We've heard a lot of questions about the procurement process. And I'm just curious about the incoming administration. So if they don't see merit in any of these ideas, for example, how do you intend to get these funds out as soon as possible to ensure that there isn't a rollback on what's already been decided? And to also make sure that you're getting this programming and also these funds out as soon as possible, considering the communities who have been disproportionately impacted.
So we've already started looking, of course, at the last Board of Contract and Supply timeline throughout the rest of this calendar year and are planning back that way. I'm confident that a lot of the programs, we will be able to meet those last deadlines and have them at least out for RFP, if not hopefully awarded. I do think that there's a responsibility, I think, also on the City Council. Once you pass this budget, at least it is part of the ordinance and there's a spending plan going forward. It would take a lot of work for us to change that ordinance again in the future and change the spending plan. So I think by us working expeditiously, working towards the box deadlines, the Board of Contract and Supply deadlines, getting your approval for this budget, of course, seeing that approval happen past the calendar year into the next administration. And then also just working with the department directors, having this as part of their portfolio so that they're working on this as well.
And obviously you're working with an outside firm for compliance purposes.
Yes.
Is that firm also going to be able to help you build capacity to make sure that these resources get out in a timely manner?
Yes, we've actually built a timeline so that we ensure the compliance review happens before the release of the RFP process. So we're working with iParametrics to ensure that we have a type like run ship, I guess you'd say, to make sure that all of these I's are dotted and T's are crossed and that they're helping us through that process. They're actually able to increase their capacity too, if necessary, to help us in crunch time. And just, I don't want to speak for them, but I think personally they're interested in this budget as well, because they're sharing the great work that we're doing here in Providence with their other clients across the country. And we're really at the forefront here with this work. So I think they're very excited to work with us going forward.
Well, it's a really exciting model. And I really appreciate the funds that are being dedicated to urban renewal impacts. In Fox Point in particular, you mentioned Lippitt Park. We've seen communities displaced as a result of urban renewal, university expansion. And as you know, the damage has already been done. A lot of those communities have already been displaced. So I'm just curious as to just hearing you elaborate more on how would those displaced by urban renewal be beneficiaries of these funds, and what would that look like specifically?
A great question. Conceivably, we may not be able to.
Could you please speak into the microphone?
I'm sorry, conceivably, we may not be able to provide direct benefits for those direct families who were displaced. But what we can do is within those neighborhoods where they've been displaced is give those families or those current residents opportunities to own a business, to own a home, the opportunity to own a home in Fox Point or Mount Hope or those areas, to stem the tide of gentrification, because one of the legacies of urban renewal that still plagues our communities, and particularly poor neighborhoods, is gentrification. So clearly these programs' intent is to empower current residents, eligible residents, of the opportunity of being able to live, work, and worship in their own community safely and financially secure. So that's how I think we might approach it. And I just want to be clear, these are catalytic dollars. These are small dollars. $400,000 is not going to move the needle. Our goal was to use these dollars to catalyze a program and then be able to work with public-private partners, be it at the state, private foundations who are actually engaged with us now, and be able to provide a long-term sustainable investment strategy.
Great. So
Thank you.
those are all my questions. Thank you for that important presentation tonight. We very much appreciate the work that's being done and the community engagement in this process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Okay, so presenters, I'm going to ask you to take a seat if you wouldn't mind. Behind the rail, right there, would be great if you don't mind.
Chairwoman, would you mind? I think Ronnie wanted to keep coming up to speak and didn't get to, so. just-
Oh, absolutely, please.
I think one of the most interesting things about this process is that this is catalytic. This is a start. $10 million does not solve reparations, and we recognize that. And we also recognize about time and timing. So yes, there will be administration changes. There will be new people here serving in the council, but we live here and we're staying here. And we will be here to hold accountability to those in power. And I think that's very important because oftentimes we are not part of that voice. And we will be here to ensure that this is implemented.
That's a wonderful segue. So now we're going to start the community part of this presentation. And again, I apologize. This was not intended as a public hearing, but I want to give you the opportunity to speak. This is an important topic, and I really appreciate everyone working with me to consolidate your input. So I have proponents and I have opponents. And what I'm going to do is introduce, okay, that's fine. I'm going to introduce proponents first, then opponents. It just happened to fall that way. And I'm going to call you up. Please come up to the podium. Please say your name. We're going to give each of you 2 minutes, giving everyone an opportunity to be heard. Okay, so the first person I have is Lamray Akai. I apologize, but please come to the mic.
It's okay. Pronunciation is Lanre Ajakai.
Okay, everybody, let's listen.
So,
Thank you.
good evening, City Council. Good evening, Finance Committee. As Joanne said, it wasn't a public meeting, so I wasn't expecting to talk. So as they say in New England, I'll talk from the hop. So first and foremost, I think I want to approach this from a different vantage point. I am a Providence native. I was born in Women and Infants when it was called Providence Lying in Wait. I'm a Providence resident. I choose to be a Providence resident purposely. I've been a coach on Elmwood Little League when Jim was president, getting kicked up dust. Juan's son played for me. I'm in the Providence travel team where I have 53 young men in the city of Providence that play for me. Some of them are here, witnessing, watching, and winning the state and New England championships this year. So the vantage point I'm going to approach this from is to talk about the committee members themselves. So as we know, 7 of them were selected by the mayor, 6 were selected by city council. Within the committee, there's probably a collective over 600 years of lived experience or residency in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm going to say that again. Over 600 collective years of lived experience or residency in Providence, Rhode Island. I've been in every single ward, and tonight, some of Jim's people are here from his ward. John's people are here. Thank you, John. Joanne's people, Carmen, I'm Carmen's ward. She saw me walking my dog this morning. Helen's people, Mary Kay's people, all witnessing and watching what's going on. We know from the Matter of Truth report, and we know from history, that trillions of dollars of atrocities were created against African American and indigenous peoples. 10 million is a starting point. But even the 10 million to ask, hey, is it 10 million warranted or is it duplicitous? As Keith said, these are catalytic investments. They're only gonna get some of these things started. So just wanna make sure that's clear. So as I talk, and please, Joanne, keep me to 2 minutes because I might have trouble staying in 2 minutes.
You're real close.
I figured as much. I want you to remember that this is the voice of the people. We asked for civic engagement or people to reach out to us. We asked for people to email us. This is civic engagement in this room from every single ward of the city of Providence, Rhode Island. And the voice of the people have spoken, and we went through on a Zoom that was public. I learned about open meetings laws and open portal. That was visible. And a lot of the people in here afterwards reached out to us because they know us as community leaders. Thank you this year for making me 2022 MLK City of Providence Community Leaders Hall of Fame. They know us as community leaders. This reparations committee represents the voice of the people speaking, and many are watching to see whether civic engagement works. Thank you.
Thank you. April Brown, please come to the podium. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is April Brown. I am the Director of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. I'm a Providence resident, and my family has lived on this land for 13 generations. We were here before most of you were here, and we welcomed you here. My family and I stand on the shoulders of those people when I make this statement. I think for me and the folks who wrote the letters in opposition of this is really about the word reparations. Reparations has a specific praxis, has a specific protocol, and a specific process. And in my personal experience, I worked on 2 reparations commissions in my life. It has its foundation in a moral imperative. Usually it has an ecclesiastical component, which is followed by not just a recognition of the specific harm done by a marginalized community. It has a full and formal apology, followed by a repatriation of people, an Indigenous people development program, an investment in cultural institutions, an alleviation of sited communities burdened through a public health initiative, an illiteracy eradication so that the legacies of slavery, colonization, or stated harm are discontinued, followed by a knowledge program so that all future generations have a deep self-awareness and rights to return to the lost ancestral knowledge of what happened through the harm that was caused. There is also a psychological rehabilitation, a technological transfer and sharing, and finally, a debt cancellation. In my reading of the toolkit, that is not addressed. And at the very least, there is no apology. And while the particular document that they are putting forth as a reparations document, I think that that's actually the challenge. Calling it a reparations document is causing further harm. And this particular process has skipped the necessary elements of a reparations praxis. In the process that I took part in, it took 5.5 years. And that's not including the craft, the apology, which took approximately 2 years. And to my knowledge, it's still ongoing. A better name for the budget would be closing the racial wealth and equity gap between Providence residents and neighborhoods, since seemingly that's the true aim of the document. When we look at how Black and Indigenous Americans are mentioned in the budget, they will not be the primary beneficiaries of the budget. There are less than 200,000 Providence residents, and of those residents, roughly 48,000 live in poverty. There are 7,269 Black African Americans alone, and 353 African American Alaska Native Indians living in poverty, for a total of 7,622, which is census numbers. Black and Indigenous Americans who were enslaved over 500 years, and this budget labels reparations, are not even likely to benefit from these monies.
Please wrap up your remarks.
Absolutely. At the forefront of REJC, what we want to do is create a just Providence, utilizing deep community process along with the idea that urgency cannot be its own reward. What we're asking is that you slow it down just a little bit or rename the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Vincent. Jim Vincent.
Will. Jim Vincent, President of the NAACP Providence Branch, Madam Chairwoman, members of the Finance Committee, members of the City Council, members of the community. As referenced by Councilor Gonzalez, I was on the Reparations Commission, a proud member, and I stand here to say that it was one of the most deliberative processes that I've been involved with in my life. We must have had 100 meetings all told, including forums. Every meeting was a public meeting. Every meeting had community input that could be made. There was all kinds of ways in terms of surveys to get the word out. So I stay here to say that I am in strong favor of the $10 million budget and each line item to remain intact as it is stated. Each line item has been discussed, has been debated by the commission, has been really talked about in terms of anybody else that wanted to weigh in terms of the appropriate time. And I stand here as somebody that stands here in strong support for the entire budget as listed. Now, as a personal note, Joanne, 24 years ago, we recognized at Rhode Island Housing that there was disparities in home ownership in the community. So you and I, and as well as others, worked tirelessly to make sure that we can make that gap narrow. So we worked on an aspect of the plan that is being further developed today. So I stand here firmly in full support of each and every line item which was debated fully by the commission and others. No change. Each one is important in terms of the comprehensive effort that we're trying to put together. So we want you to do the right thing, approve the budget exactly as presented with no change to any items, because any change would jeopardize, I think, the whole plan. And that truly would be not only unsettling, but really been a disappointment for the city of Providence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. And thank you for all your work throughout the years. It's absolutely been a pleasure to work with you. Okay, Joshua Franco.
Hello, Madam Chair. 2 minutes. To be honest with you, I feel like 2 minutes is limited, especially to the First Amendment, freedom of speech. That's the first thing.
Please continue.
Secondly, I'm gonna say this. I only had 30 minutes to read this whole article about it, and I see a few problems. Funding to establish a school for African heritage and Indigenous. This is coming from someone that attended 3 Providence public high schools. So you're telling me you're gonna take every Black Indigenous student out of these schools, or you're gonna actually have a lottery system? And secondly, if you want to talk about education, let's talk about the Moses Brown. Let's talk about John Brown. Let's talk about Brian Stevenson. Let's talk about the 13th Amendment. I personally feel this is a recommendation for someone that actually served the community since 18 years old. On the Cranston Street Armory, we should have a museum here. $10 million? Seriously, $10 million? And you can't even recommend a museum? Disgraceful. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Lisa Ranglin. Please take the mic.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Of course, I am in your district, District 5. In addition, let me just say, Lisa Ranglin, I am the CEO of the Rhode Island Black Business Association. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here tonight. And I do stand in support of the $10 million. Let me just say, and I've spoken publicly around, $10 million is a great start, but it is not enough. We all can agree that this is a great start. I look at this as an investment in kicking off important work. We know for way too long, the Black and brown communities have been left behind. We must invest intentionally. When I look through the material that has been presented and to the commissioners and to Keith and team, thank you all for this incredible work. We must, I read the ARPA dollars or the regulation back in May, every single page. And it speaks to the most impactful communities. COVID has shown us what we all knew for many years, that Black and brown and poor whites have been left behind for a very long time. And we must close the wealth gaps. We can all sit here and say all of the line items that have been outlined, they're not enough. I can tell you as the CEO of Rhode Island Black Business Association, lots of funding came in through the state, commerce, the city, and they've left our business behind. What we're talking about is investing in homeownership. We know that homeownership is one of the largest assets that a family will hold. It's also generational, passing it down from one person to the other and keep it in the family. I can tell you that the Black and brown community, it's not a lack of trying to be homeowners or to gain access to these things that we have outlined in here. The system, the structure continues to leave us behind. To all of you that are here with a voting power, I encourage you to think about your constituents. Think about the people that have elected you to do this important work. We're counting on you. What we've seen here, it is a start. It is not enough, but I do recommend that we move forward with these items that are outlined and look for ways for us to invest even greater in these communities, our community, our neighbors, real people we're talking about. These are not just statistics. We're talking about our neighbors. Our children's future depends on how we lead. And I call on all of you with a voting power to do the right thing, and let's work creatively in finding more resources so we can do a lot more. This is just the start. With all of us rolling up our sleeves and working together, we can create Providence and create a city that we can all be proud of. I've been in the state almost 40 years. I'm all the way from Kingston, Jamaica. Got into Providence as a teenage girl, I never left. And I can tell you, I love this city, but we gotta do more. We're leaving too many neighbors behind. And I wanna thank you all for your vote and for your commitment to lifting all of us, not just some of us. Thank you so much, God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Joseph Buchanan. Joseph Buchanan, you have 2 minutes.
My name is Joseph P. Buchanan. I'm the president of the Black Political Action Committee and also for the Funds of Political Black Progress, which I donated to some of y'all's campaign, which we did. We're here for this report. I'm here to tell you that I don't agree with it. I agree with the $10 million, but I don't agree with everything that's in this report. I don't see anything in here that's gonna help low-income housing residents. I don't see anything in there that's gonna help get our homeless off the street, because we're supposed to be helping our people, which is helping the Blacks and the Indigenous people get resources in their pocket, not in their mind. You guys are taking our money, I believe, and spending it any way that you deem necessary. But my councilman over here put a check on it for a minute, and I hope this councilwoman that's trying to run for council president understands that unless they meet with our community, that there's going to be problems with this thing. We're not saying stop the $10 million. What we are saying that we want to say and how this $10 million is going to be spent. We don't want our commissioners to ignore the residents of the city of Providence. And we definitely don't want them to ignore Black people and Indigenous people. My sister Bella will be up here speaking next, and I hope that everybody is prepared for what she has to say. Because we as a Black and brown community are not playing around. We elected you to do the right thing. And Ms. Ryan, I'm quite sure that you will do the right thing because you did it at the city level when we had our city ward committee. So I'm quite sure as a leader of our community, you will do the right thing and you will listen to our community. And I won't be doing no cursing today. I'll be a nice Black gentleman. But I want you to understand that unless you do this thing right, I'm not opposing $10 million. I'm opposing some of the ideas that some of our ambassadors might have imposed. Because I was born and raised in the city. I'm 70 years old. And some of the folks on this commission, in my opinion, don't have the right say in my community or in our community. You see all these young Black gentlemen up here? These are young folks that haven't been engaged in this process because I guess some of these ambassadors didn't want young people engaged into this process. And when we're looking up for some of our young people, you city council people have failed because it was your job to put some of the people in your community on this commission. It wasn't done. Some of your city council people held up some of this stuff. Again, you're just as much to blame as some of our commissioners. I won't say all of them because I like quite a few of them. I just want them to understand that unless you're going to deal with our community, you're going to have problems, you're going to have headaches, and we'll be back again. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
God
Buchanan.
bless you, and don't forget.
Okay. Arnell Millhouse. Arnell Millhouse. 2 minutes, please.
Good evening, counselors. My name is Arnell Millhouse. I'm the CEO of Career Devs Computer Science Institute, entrepreneur in residence for Brown University in 2019 and 2020. I'm also the vice chair, commissioner for this reparations report. And, you know, the two pieces of paper that are on your desk in front of you, they have titles, proponents and opponents. But I really don't see it like that. I don't see us as being proponents and opponents because we've never been in the same room before. We've never been in the same room before to discuss $10 million for our community. We're not proponents or opponents. We're people looking for the right opportunity and for the right thing to be done. This is an opportunity to make sure that those who are not in complete agreement have a seat at the table and have a say to make sure that the right thing is done. I made sure I spent the most of my time tonight speaking to people like Mr. Buchanan and a few other people that were not in full agreement with what is being done here tonight. Tonight's an opportunity to make sure that the right thing is done. So to make sure that tomorrow or on Monday or on Tuesday of next week, that we meet to make sure that everyone here has a voice and a say on how this thing goes forward. But I do not believe that tonight's a night to say no to this. I believe that tonight is a night that we can all realize that the forces that want to divide us.
Please speak into the microphone, sir.
I believe that the voices that want to divide us, I'm going to face this way. I'm going to finish the rest of my time facing this way.
You're all done, sir.
I rest my time.
You're given the opportunity to address the committee, sir. Bellonoka?
Oscar Wikwasaneta. That is, thank you, my friends. I am a Narragansett tribal elder. And I've been here since time immemorial. I predate your constitution, your bylaws, your ordinances and all of that above. And I find it very appropriate that we are standing here in Providence where Roger Williams stole from my people this land. I find it very appropriate that there, Kennedy Square is where they sold slaves. I find it very appropriate. Yeah, I too was born in Lion Inn Hospital, and I grew up in Chad Brown, and I lived on the east side of Providence, and I lived in Fox Point. But this is all my land. I can move wherever I want freely. This is the land of the Narragansett tribal nation. However, we run the risk of being erased because the Narragansetts that live in Narragansett, Rhode Island, are calling themselves the Narragansetts. I would like to say that the Narragansetts did not have a voice here. They tried to contact your mayor. Your mayor did not respond to the calls. I reached out to some of his staff members, in which I have every text, every email to prove what I am saying to be true. I find it very concerning that their voice was not involved in here. We are the only federally recognized tribe in the state of Rhode Island, though I don't really care for that process. But there is no state recognized tribe. Any other tribe has fallen under the umbrella of protection by the Narragansett tribe. I stand here because it's insulting to put a whole huge group of people. Indigenous people should have a class of their own. The African Americans who suffered so greatly should be in a class of their own, because Jewish people would not be here in a class with Italian and Irish. It would never happen. You got Ukrainian people in a class of their own, but yet we are all put together in a nice, tidy package, and we're supposed to be grateful over $10 million. And that may be a lot to some, but it is insulting to many. And the earmarked places of where this money is going, is it going to cherry-picked people? Who's going to determine? A group of people? I lived on the east side of Providence. Chad Brown, all of what I mentioned, Fox Point. And there was a population of my very own people who could not hang with us. They were better than us. We were the poor kids who were on welfare. They couldn't hang with us. You know, I know a couple of your faces in here who remember. And now, all of a sudden, they are the voices of the Black community and the Indigenous community. But yet the people that I see can't even afford to live here. So you need to earmark land and build houses. You need to earmark land, because there's not going to be, no matter how much money you make, we're not going to be able to afford these homes. So I thank you for your time. I speak for many. I speak for my ancestors. I speak for the people who are here today and the 7 generations to come. I hope.
Representative Ranglin Vassal. Representative Ranglin Vassal. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I am so grateful to be here. I am so grateful for this moment. I stand here in full support of this $10 million, which I must say, and I should echo the sentiments of every person or most people that have already spoken, this is really inadequate. So why is this inadequate? It's inadequate because what this money seeks to address is the harm, the mental, emotional, psychological, physical harm of racism. So I am Jamaican, I'm a Black woman. My ancestors were brought in shackles to the Americas, in my case, to Jamaica, where there were Taínos Indians, Arawak Indians, and there were people, indigenous people. And so I stand here today on behalf of my ancestors whose blood cries from the Atlantic Ocean. I stand here today as state representative, representative of the people of Woonsocket, Charles, and Elmhurst, and the people that are not in this room, the people who are working 80 hours a week to make ends meet. I stand here today on behalf of generations of people who have endured racist actions and have endured generational trauma. I speak here today to honor the sweat, the blood, the tears of my ancestors who are not here. I speak today on behalf of the Black and Indigenous children and their families who have been marginalized, stigmatized, racialized for centuries. This is a moral imperative. It seems respectfully ridiculous that we're having conversations about something that is a given. We know that enslavement existed. We know that people were brought to the Americas, by the way. And by the way, let me just say this. Black people are the only group of people in this country that did not ask to come here. We didn't ask to go to the Americas. Let me just reiterate. Black people, African Americans, are the only group of people in this country where there was an explicit law that you could not educate us. We better fix our schools. They're falling apart. We better fix the economic disparity or the racial gaps. So $10 million, I'm sorry, it's not cutting it. Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, I said this before, and I'm going to reiterate because I'm closing this off. This money that we're here talking about and debating, we're just simply trying to fix something that is wrong and to make it right. That's all we're trying to do.
Please wrap up your remarks, Rep.
I am going to wrap up now. This is your moment. Every single member on this committee, history will record your vote. Every single member of this committee, history will record your vote. do the right thing, do what is right, repair that breach, vote to approve. You said it was approved, Chairwoman. I urge you, I encourage you, do the right thing, do the godly thing, and vote yes on this $10 million. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Rep.
Thank you, members of the committee. God bless you.
Justice Gaines.
Hi, thank you all, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for opening this up to public comment. My name is Justice Gaines. I am an African-American resident of Providence and a former member of the African-American Ambassadors Group. I would ask all of the members of the council to ask deeper questions about what robust community engagement is. What I've been hearing tonight and what I've heard from the city multiple times is that the African-American Ambassadors Group was a part of the robust community engagement. They're also the only group pinpointed in this to get specific money to evolve their programming. Unfortunately, I have to speak about why I do not feel that makes robust community engagement. I joined the AAG in September of 2020 in hopes of connecting with an intergenerational local Black community to discuss the deep systemic and social realities that African Americans still experience in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the global Black uprisings that summer. But the African American Ambassadors Group was not a space in which Black community members could participate with their full histories, wisdoms, or experiences. During my time with the African American Ambassadors Group, younger and passionate Black members of the group, including myself, were regularly dismissed, degraded, and silenced for speaking out against what they felt were unjust and discriminatory practices within the group and the mayor's administration. The AAAG will inevitably respond that they are a community-led space. This is not true. Mayor Alorz's administration has tight control over who and how community members participate in this space. City-paid staffers were all too willing to mute over Zoom a raised or disruptive voice in the name of protecting their publicly elected boss from public ire, an act of literal silencing as well as textbook censorship. This practice was supported by many community leaders, many of whom were on the Reparations Commission itself, who prioritized an air of respectability over Black folks naming harm with truth and dignity. The city has not demonstrated the capacity to lead or facilitate a truthful, truth-filled community engagement process that would be reparative or equitable for Providence's African American residents, past and present, that would lead to meaning transformative reparations. A reparative community process to reckon with the history of African Americans in Providence must be capable and willing to facilitate community pain, not dismiss disruption for the means of comfort. An open community process must provide space to process generations of trauma and to hold and comfort Black residents in their moments of rage and righteous anger. A city committed to upholding appearances, they're almost done. A city committed to upholding appearances can never confront the ugly faces of truth. Ever more unfortunate because those confrontations lead to the most beautiful futures for Black peoples. A morally and historically just reparations or equity process must allow all African Americans of Providence, past and present, to participate in their full Black humanity.
Thank you. Desmond Ranglin. Desmond Ranglin. Desmond Ranglin. He's gone, okay. Melody Thompson, please. Melody Thompson. One more time, Melody Thompson. Wanda Brown.
Good evening, everyone.
We've heard a lot of different testimonies. We heard a lot of different energy. 2 minutes is not a lot of time to say what you need to say.
No, this can go.
But I simply want to say,
I asked them.
it would behoove you to simply pass this bill, right? There is not and should not be a big discussion about the money, right? Because we know the harm that was done, that was already spoken to, all those things was addressed, right? And we're trying to make this a better community in which I live in which I raised 4 children in the city of Providence. And so all of the harm that was done from many different communities, many different people of color, from many different walks of life, right? Indians, Narragansett, Black, African-American, we should not be clopped together, but we are. And one of the things that we continue to deal with is people putting us in one box and allowing us to fight over monies. We sit here today with mixed emotions about the dollars. But one of the things that the commissioners have done is really taken a really good look at how everybody could benefit from this process. This is not about just Black people, although it should be, but it is not. Because what we understand, which most people don't understand, is that you're a human being first, created by God. And everybody should treat each other with dignity and respect and honor. And when we do that, we work together. We don't work separately in silos. Part of the energy that's behind us comes from leadership, right? That energy comes from leadership. One of the things I was talking to Mr. Buchanan about, because he was on a opposing side, which it shouldn't be anyone opposing, money's coming into the community to help anybody, no matter what your race is. We should all be in agreement that the money needs to come. So one of the things he was angry about is that he received those documents that he has today in his hand late. And I'd like to say to Mr. Igliosa, it took you a long time to get your people on board, right? The mayor appointed 7 people, you had to appoint 6. You took a very long time, which means we had to backpedal, which means we had to wait, which means we had to all get on the same page, right? As far as the people are concerned, it was us who made it late. It was the commissioners, but I'm here to let the record reflect it was on you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Brother Gary Gray? Brother Gray? Do we have? No? Brother Gray? Okay, that concludes the community piece of this. All right, folks. Council, committee members, do you have any thoughts, concerns on this topic? Committee members, Councilman Taylor.
I would just like to, in defense of Ken Cheverini, our legal team, that is not Council President John Igliozzi, that is Ken Cheverini, our legal team. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, folks.
So the meeting
ends
at 7:30. Councilman, 7:30,
Madam-
is that what they said, Mr. Bryant?
Please.
6 o'clock, 7:30.
Madam Chair.
Council committee members, yes. Councilman Harris.
Thank you. This has been really good because I guess deep down inside and just listening to many of the people speak, I worry a lot about sustainability. Sustainability has always been the problem of the city. We start good things, we start good projects, and all of a sudden the money disappears and there is no more good projects, no good effort. I would like to hear a little bit more on sustainability, even though I am not a part of this committee tonight and I will not be voting. I do know it will be coming before the full council. So I would like to, I haven't heard a lot about, because I heard a lot of my community members, which was very wise to say, this is just the start. Starts are good. I started a lot of things, but at the end, I usually didn't, complete without something. I was missing something to complete sometime. So I think it would make me feel better if, Madam Chair, you would allow the group to talk a little bit about the sustainability of these projects.
Administration.
If you don't mind.
Absolutely,
Appreciate
Councilwoman.
that.
Please take the podium. Can you please try to address Councilwoman Harris's
Yes.
concern, if you can?
Absolutely. So we have been making a concerted effort to do some initial fundraising to match these dollars. We've actually been having conversations with local and national funders to do that. As also mentioned, in terms of seeding some opportunities or actually bridging some funding for existing opportunities, we know, again, this budget is not enough to address everything that people are concerned with here and all the histories and harms that have occurred, but we need to do something as a start. Some work has been done to close the racial wealth gap, but not enough to fully address that issue. So I would say that as part of this budget, although $10 million is not enough, being able to use part of this to continue that effort to close the racial wealth gap and hopefully change a culture around the city and the state around continuing to put resources in that direction. The commission report was not just about the budget. $10 million was one small ask of the commission to consider as part of how we could address the many harms and histories that have occurred that have harmed people in the city of Providence and across this country. So I just want to know that there's a lot of meat in that commission report that talks about advocacy, that talks about working with the state, that talks about mobilizing communities to continue these efforts. So when we talk about sustainability, it's not just this $10 million, but it's really about the community coming together collectively to really continue this effort going forward for many years to come. I'll also note, I know there was a question earlier around the ARPA funding. It is required, though, at least for the $10 million, that we appropriate this funding. We make obligations before the end of 2024, and then we expend this by the end of 2026. So there is that time component that does work with the funding as well. I hope that answered. Do you want to add anything?
I'm really pushing for more resources. $10 million, just like you said, is really nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. I've heard many things, and many of those efforts that people brought forth is legit, but is there a push for other resources other than this opera money that we need to be very sure that it's spent correctly, because it'll never come back?
Thank you, Councilperson. We've already been engaged with a number of public and private foundations and organizations, many who have reached out to us because of the interest in the programs that we've set aside and the intent that we've had. In fact, last week, we had an outstanding public meeting with United Way in a partnership that included over 100 people, largely social service providers, business providers, to hear specifically about our implementation plan. So our goal from the very beginning was to use this $10 million catalytically as a starting point to engage other public-private institutions and braid other additional dollars that can come into the city. We were clearly understood that this was not going to be sustained with City of Providence taxpayer dollars. That is a false narrative. It is a bad policy. We clearly understood this as an opportunity to use federal dollars at our disposal to be able to leverage and attract additional public-private partnerships and investments in this city and in the people of Providence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, any other questions? Councilwoman Anthony.
Questions? I just didn't know if we were discussing.
Excuse me?
I do not have any more questions of the presenters.
Oh, okay, great. Council members, any questions, concerns, issues? Okay. What would the committee like to do? I'd like to entertain a motion to recommend approval of the $10 million spending plan. Do we have that motion?
I'd like to make the motion.
Motion made by Councilwoman Anthony. Do I have a second?
I second the recommendation.
Seconded by Councilwoman Castillo, Vice Chair Castillo. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. The matter passes. This item now goes to the council for a full vote. I would like to thank everyone for your contributions, your patience, your hard work on this topic. I need a motion to adjourn. Councilwoman Anthony?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.